Have you ever heard that Germany is actually 4 different countries trapped inside one border? The beer-drinking Bavarians, the robotic Prussians, the bitter East, and the arrogant West. The title of this video says we hate each other. And as a German, I'm here to tell you, you are absolutely right. But not for the reasons you think. Forget the tourist brochures and the Oktoberfest clichés. Today, I'm going to brutally explain the real resentments tearing my country apart and why our hate is actually a highly calculated system keeping this nation from collapsing. Let's dissect the 4 Germanys. Let's start by destroying the biggest tourist myth out there. People online love to romanticize the cultural clash between the Catholic Bavarians in the Alps and the robotic Prussians up north. They make it sound like a passionate, ancient, bitter rivalry. But honestly, it's much colder than that. The separation between these regions isn't a glitch in our society. It's an intentional firewall built into modern Germany. After the devastation of the 1940s, the architects of our 1949 Constitution realized a terrifying truth. Giving one central authority all the power in Germany is historically a catastrophic idea. So what was the German solution? Institutionalized distrust. Extreme federalism. We gave our 16 states, the Länder, massive independent power over their police, education, and economies. A Bavarian doesn't govern himself because he dislikes the folks in Berlin. He governs himself to guarantee he never has to take orders from a centralized Prussian power ever again. To fully grasp this, you have to understand a bizarre historical fact. The Prussia I just mentioned, it technically doesn't exist anymore. After the 1940s, the Allies literally wiped Prussia off the map. They declared it a dangerous, militaristic entity and dissolved it completely. But you cannot delete a mindset with a treaty. The ghost of Prussia still possesses the entire northern half of Germany. The cold efficiency, the obsession with duty, the belief that work is a secular religion. And how does the South, like Bavaria, fight back against this northern ghost? Through bureaucratic warfare. Our federalism is so extreme that it borders on the absurd. A high school diploma from Bavaria is practically considered a different academic currency than one from Berlin. Our state police forces use different systems. Our schools teach different versions of history. To give you a real example, during the recent global health crisis, the world watched in confusion as our chancellor had absolutely no power to enforce a national lockdown. The chancellor literally had to beg the 16 state governors to cooperate, and states like Bavaria just ignored Berlin and did whatever they wanted. It is a decentralized nightmare for politicians, but a masterpiece of historical insurance. We built a machine so incredibly complex and divided that no single dictator could ever hijack it again. We forced ourselves to be divided because a perfectly united Germany hasn't exactly worked out well for the rest of the world, has it? While tourists are busy taking photos of beer and sausages, they completely miss the actual, deepest open fracture in our country, the East-West divide. The Ossis and the Wessis. Other channels will tell you they clash because of 40 years of Cold War propaganda. That's a cute story, but if you want the truth, follow the money. In 1990, the reunification of Germany wasn't some heartwarming family reunion. It was a ruthless corporate buyout. The West didn't unite with the East, they absorbed it. The agency in charge of privatizing the East German economy liquidated entire industries overnight. Millions of highly educated people in the East suddenly found out their degrees were useless. Their factories were sold off for pennies to Western executives. Today, Westerners, Wessis, look at the East as an unprofitable branch that drained their tax dollars for decades. Meanwhile, Easterners, Ossis, feel like they were conquered and treated as second-class citizens in their own country. Look at the data. Even today, the top jobs in the East, generals, judges, university presidents, are overwhelmingly held by Westerners. To understand how deep this psychological scar goes, you just have to look at the vocabulary we invented to insult each other. In the West, they use the term Jammerassi, the whining Easterner, the stereotype of a people who complain constantly, who expect the state to fix everything, and who refuse to adapt to modern capitalism. But in the East, they fire back with Wessis, the know-it-all Westerner. The arrogant manager who rolled into town in a Mercedes in 1991, bought the local factory, fired half the town, and then lectured them on how to be real Germans. This division isn't just history. It's geography you can literally see from space. If you look at a satellite map of Germany at night, the east still glows in a different color because they use different, older streetlights from the Soviet era. They watch different television programs, and they buy different brands. This isn't a metaphor. In the eastern state of Thuringia, a local communist-era soda, called Vita Cola, still regularly outsells global giants like Coca-Cola. They even held on to their own mustard brands and traffic light symbols. Why? Because buying them is a subtle, everyday act of rebellion. When the West looks at the East, they see a bad financial investment. When the East looks at the West, they see an occupying force dressed in expensive suits. Now let's talk about you. People from Spain, Italy, France, and Latin America watch videos about Germany's divisions and act shocked in the comments. But let's be brutally honest. Spain is constantly held hostage by its own regional crises. Italy basically operates as two completely different planets, the wealthy North and the subsidized South. And Latin America is an endless web of intense regional rivalries. Germany is not uniquely divided. The only difference is efficiency. When your countries face regional friction, your economies stall, your politicians argue endlessly on television, and everything freezes. When Germany divides, we channel that resentment into our local parliaments, weaponize our differences, and go right back to building cars, exporting machinery, and dominating the European economy. We don't let our regional egos interrupt our cash flow. Just look at our financial equalization system. Every single year, wealthy southern states like Bavaria furiously complain and even threaten lawsuits because they are forced to pay billions to subsidize the hipster, debt-ridden capital of Berlin. They openly despise it. But guess what? The check still clears every year. The system holds. We figured out how to be extremely productive while harboring intense regional resentments. But if anyone tells you Germany is just Bavarians, Prussians, East, and West, their intel is 20 years out of date. There's a new front line reshaping our country. I call it the Fifth Germany. We brought in millions of guest workers, Gastarbeiter, mostly from Turkey, to rebuild the country. Then came recent waves of migration. We desperately need their essential workforce to keep our giant economic engine running, but we completely failed to integrate them. So now, you have a society deeply fractured. Look at the brutal reality of our streets. The doner kebab industry, built by Turkish immigrants, generates billions of euros, vastly outselling the traditional German sausage. They literally feed the nation. Yet, a third-generation kid born in Berlin, speaking perfect German, is still constantly asked, "Where are you really from?" Take the bitter, economically frustrated East that we just talked about. They are channeling their historical anger into massive votes for hardline populist movements. The establishment in the West wants open borders and global business. The East wants closed borders and traditional identity. And caught in the middle is this massive demographic of immigrants who built the modern infrastructure but are still treated as outsiders. This isn't a cute debate about Oktoberfest anymore. This is a brutal tug-of-war for the actual soul of Germany. To wrap this up, Germany isn't a broken family. We are a highly decentralized, practical machine designed to survive our own complex history. We argue, we distrust each other, but we keep the factories running. Now, I want to hear your brutal honesty in the comments. Is strong regional division a fatal flaw that ruins a country? Or is extreme decentralization the only way a modern nation can survive? Let me know who handles it worse, us or your country. If you want more ruthless, historical, and strategic truth, hit that like button, subscribe to the WarSim, and I'll see you on the next battlefield.